All right, here's what I want you to do. Um, in a little bit, I'm going to show you a series of images. They're going to be very short. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. What I want you to do is say out loud what you see in the images. So if you're in a room right now with a bunch of other people or something, go to a different room because I don't want them to start, don't want people to stare at you weird. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, and I'm not going to show them very long, like 3 seconds each. All right, so what you guys did was you participated in what is called the Rorschach Test, or as is more commonly known, the Inkblot Test. And what the Inkblot Test is all about is really this, is to get a feel for what is going on inside your unconscious. So we're still in the kind of in the realm of the psychoanalysts, but today is kind of the catch-all of others. The people who came after Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, and people who knew them, people who worked with them, people that they understood the ideas that they were trying to put out there, and really just kind of how they contributed to the overall psychoanalytic theory, as well as adding some of their own spin on some of Freud's ideas and a little bit of Jung too, but mainly is focusing on Freud. Um, and kind of how they contributed to our kind of understanding of personality and all the other good stuff. So, first is the idea of Alfred Adler, or the ideas of Alfred Adler. He was another student of Freud, so he knew Carl Jung as well. But what he did, what he added to the equation, was really this. Um, he pretty much agreed with most of what Freud said, but he added that this idea that people were driven to overcome feelings of inferiority. So there were two examples that he kind of pointed to. First was a guy named Demosthenes. He is a old Greek orator, um, but what happened was he had a speech impediment. He really had a hard time talking in general. So what he did was he practiced speaking by putting a bunch of pebbles in his mouth and practicing and practicing and practicing. And in so doing, he became one of the greatest Greek speakers or orators in ancient Greece. And then there was the other guy, Napoleon Bonaparte. Pretty much the idea is the little man conquers the world. Story's a bit more complicated and nuanced than that. No, Napoleon was not a midget. Um, he was actually of average height. But what happened was he was from Corsica, and if in French society at that time you came from Corsica, you were kind of like, how can I put it nicely, the redneck trailer trash of France. So very humble beginnings, sense of inferiority as far as his place in society. He works twice as hard to become someone great. And this is kind of what Adler calls the inferiority complex. Pretty much the idea is this: an inferiority complex involves feelings of inadequacy, and what happens is there is a reason why people feel inferior about something. Maybe they can't talk. Maybe they're from very humble beginnings. Maybe all the issues of life, whatever it may be. You suck in math, you suck at science. So you got these issues. You have these feelings of inadequacies. A person tries to avoid the cause of those feelings of uh, inadequacy. So, in order to avoid those feelings of inadequacy, we learn and do things such as learning to walk or learning how to read so we don't have those feelings of inadequacy. All right? A lot of people, they think of an inferiority complex, and this is kind of pop psychology. They think of an inferiority complex as somebody who walks around and they feel bad about themselves. Not necessarily the case. And if for Adler, an inferiority complex was you are aware that you have a flaw or a weakness. So what do? You work hard or you work in order to overcome that weakness or flaw or whatever. And what he said was parental influences do play a big role in this. And what happens is a child who is over pampered, like their mommy and daddy are always there, mommy and daddy always bail them out, will lead to self-absorbed adults. On the flip side, if a child is neglected, they will grow to be resentful and vengeful in their nature. And maybe not even vengeful towards their own parents, but they'll, in essence, try to take it out on the rest of society or the people around them. So again, this is kind of, for a parent, and this is one of those things that makes it hard to be a parent, is even with Adler, is you have to walk a fine line where you have to take care of your child, take care of their needs and all those other things, but at the same time, you also have to ensure that they're able to stand on their own 2 feet. It's a balance. Eric Fromm, pretty much what he said, added to the equation, was life is a balance between loneliness and freedom. And it's really this. People want to be free. Like they want to be able to do their own thing or lead their own life how they see fit or based on or what their conscience tells them. But what he said was absolute freedom will lead to a life of isolation. Um, on the flip side, if you absolutely belong to someone or something, you will lose your freedoms. So, and this is kind of a almost a Piagetian idea, where you have you know the rules of society, and you play the rules of society, so you can interact with society on a functional level. But at the same time, you don't want to be so consumed by the society that you are no longer your own person. Um, that you literally just become a mindless zombie, for lack of a better term. And this is kind of what Fromm says, like, can freedom become a burden? Too heavy for a man to bear, something he tries to escape from. Is there not also, perhaps, besides the innate desire for freedom, the instinctive wish for submission? So, again, there are things, and this is kind of this balancing act that we all play. There are things that we don't want to be responsible for. And this is kind of picking off something that Freud said, is people don't necessarily want to be free. Like Freud said this. People don't necessarily want to be free because if they're free, that means that they're responsible. If they're responsible, that means whatever the consequences may be, good, bad, indifferent, it falls onto them. And this is from, he's just kind of building off of that idea. Karen Horney, what she talked about, probably of all the psychoanalysts, she was probably the most anti-Freud, even though she still kind of believed in a lot of a lot of what Freud said. But pretty much what she said was kind of this. She stressed the idea of basic anxiety. She kind of went along with the psychosexual stages of Freud and those types of things. But yeah, she stressed kind of anxiety, and what she defined anxiety as a child feels how a child feels with helplessness. All right. Because again, we all have those moments, and especially when you're younger, where you do feel a little bit helpless, where you are at the whim of other bigger people, like, your parents or stuff like that. When you're 3 years old, or 4 years old, or 5 years old, you can't really take care of yourself. So to a certain extent, there is this sense of helplessness. But what you have to do is, and every child has to do this, and even adults have to do this, um, you have to kind of understand those feelings. And this is where loving parents and nurturing parents will kind of step in. And kind of what her idea was this, where you have a mom, a dad, and a kid. The kid is going to go through issues as they grow and develop because there's things that they don't understand, things that they're being driven by within their own unconscious. What the parents need to do is, as those children and that child moves through those different stages of Freud's psychosexual stages, what the parents need to do is help the child, love the child, guide the child through those stages. Um, and as those issues will come up, and if the parents are understanding and loving of the child as they go through those stages, it will avoid all those all those issues that Freud talked about that people get when they grow and develop. Um, and then on top of that, she also rejected Freud's idea of penis envy. And what she said instead was men have womb envy. And pretty much the idea is this, men can't give birth to children. So in essence, women create life. Granted, they do need guys to help, but that's beside the point. So because men cannot give birth to children, and in essence, care and nurture and create life, men go off and they do other things to feel as validated. Like, create countries, become world famous comedians, create empires, all those things that guys do. She would say that it's ultimately because men can't give birth to children, and thus cannot create life. So they have to create other things to fulfill a void that men have. And then lastly, you have Erik Erikson. He mostly accepted most of what Freud was saying, but what he did was he added 8 psychosocial stages from birth to old age. Because again, for Freud, you end the process in your 30s, or your early to mid 20s. Um, and so for Erikson, he added the psychosocial stages, and what these stress is your social contact with other people and how you move through those different stages from a social level. And kind of with Erikson, and a little bit, and with Erikson as well as Freud, feelings from a young age can affect who a person is in adulthood and later adulthood and old age and those types of things. So, and these are kind of Erikson's 8 stages. Um, Starting off at, a lot of these will seem a little familiar because, again, he mostly did accept Freud. He just added kind of a social element on top of it. So he did kind of follow with Freud's psychosexual stages, but this is just another component to add to it. So again, stage 1, Very familiar. Trust versus mistrust. If need, and what happens at this stage? If needs are developed, if needs are dependently met, infants develop a sense of basic trust. So if mommy and daddy take care of the infant, um, boom, there you go. Next, um, around the toddler stage, like Freud's anal stage, autonomy versus shame slash doubt. Toddlers learn to exercise will and do things for themselves. Again, these are little things. We're not talking, go file their taxes or something, but these are little things. And exercise free will, do things for themselves, or they will learn to doubt their own abilities. So, to a certain extent, what he said was toddlers need to learn a little bit on how to be their own self. Still have rules around them, still have some structure in place, but allow your children to explore a little bit. And then around preschool time, where you have initiative versus guilt, preschoolers learn to initiate tasks and carry out plans, or they feel guilty about efforts to be independent. Around this time, preschoolers, they're learning the process to make a plan, to do things, starting to understand the idea of consequence. If I do this, this will happen. Sorry, throat's getting a little dry. Then the next stage, industry versus inferiority. Children learn the pleasure of applying themselves to tasks, or they can learn to feel inferior. So, again, doing something just for the sake that it's fun for them. It's interesting to them. When little Timmy gets teased because he likes to play with blocks a certain way, that makes little Timmy feel bad. So little Timmy will develop a sense of maybe inferiority or guilt about engaging in that kind of behavior. And again, we all have just look at yourself a little bit, because a lot of people have things that they would like to do, but they're kind of embarrassed by it. Why might that be the case? Maybe somebody wants to learn how to sing. Maybe somebody wants to, learn how to, write a book, write a novel, draw, go into comics, take up arts. But for some reason, they're hesitant to do that. This is kind of where this can come from. Um, Around your teenager years, pretty much identity versus confusion. Teenagers, they're messed up, especially when they're in middle school. This is why middle schoolers got problems. That's why I don't do middle school. But teenagers work at refining a sense of self by testing roles. And again, this is the idea of, who are they? Are they an athlete? Are they an artist? Do they sing? Do they dance? What do they do? Are they an academic? Around, teenage years, they're trying to figure that out. Who are you? Who am I as a person? And what am I good at? What do I like to do? And so this whole thing at this time is trying to figure out a sense of identity, figuring out who they are. And if they're not able to, that can lead to confusion for later down the road as to who are they as a person. I've heard some psychologists say that this is kind of where the midlife crisis comes from, or where the midlife crisis can come from. Because I've known 30-year-olds and late 20-year-olds who act like they're teenagers still, because ultimately they don't know who they are as a person. Um, and then 6, around your young adult time, late 16, 17, 18 to mid 20s, around this point. Young adults struggle to form close relationships and to gain the capacity for intimate love, or they feel socially isolated. Pretty much the idea is this: do you have friends? Friends become important, like even more so important, because you have to, in essence, and this is kind of the thing that when you're dating, looking for a boyfriend, looking for a girlfriend. Ultimately, what you're doing is you are looking at, you're vetting candidates, the people that you could conceivably spend the rest of your life with. That's what you're doing. You're vetting candidates for that. And the idea with it that kind of goes with this is the idea of intimacy, because an intimacy does not necessarily mean a sexual thing. What this means is people that you can be genuine with, where you don't have to put up a facade or be fake, or you could actually have those real conversations with someone else. And that's this point. Jenner 7 stage 7, this is around your 40s ish. Generativity versus stagnation. Middle age discovers sense of contributing to the world, usually through family and work, or they may feel a lack of purpose. Again, what is your reason for existing? Why do you live? What conceivable reason do you have to get out of bed in the morning? That's really the question. So again, middle age. This is where you have a sense of the bigger world. Not so much with you or even your immediate family, but a sense of the rest of the world. How do the actions that you take today impact the possibility of tomorrow? Not just for you, but for everybody else. And then you pretty much run through this till you reach nearing the end. This is where you're in your 60s. Integrity versus despair. You sit back and you begin to reflect on your life. What have you done with your life? Were you a success in your life, or were you a failure? Did you raise your children to be successful? And as such, are your children being successful, or are your children losers? Did you achieve the things that you wanted to do? Did you write that novel, or did you give up? Did you learn how to sing, or did you give that up? Did you set out? Did you do the things you said that you wanted to do? Again, kind of heavy, but this is kind of what happens at the end of life. Or just any time you think about it. But these are kind of the questions. And at each of these stages, these are the things that people struggle with. And again, often these are not a conscious struggle. In fact, a lot of people will live huge chunks of their lives avoiding these types of things, but they're still there. Just because you avoid it doesn't mean that, it's not there. Sticking your head in the sand doesn't make the lion that's chasing you go away. You just don't see it when it gets you. But again, these are the other kind of psychoanalysts that are there, and people who have built on psychoanalytic theory. Tomorrow, we'll look into kind of the humanist side, people like Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, those types of people. People that are different than Freud and the other psychoanalysts, but in the end, they're still kind of similar. Help trying to figure out how to develop a personality, what goes into a personality, what are the things and the building blocks that make you, you, and me, and Timmy, and your brother or sister. Okay? And that's about it for this. Peace out.